those of you that got to enjoy the dinner, thank you for who got it situated, and appreciate it. It was a great dinner as always, and good socialization as well. So thanks for coming back today, and I'd like to start it off by let's call the roll.
Chair Martin,
Here.
Vice Chair Hamilton,
Here.
Secretary Witten, here. Regent Cox,
Here.
Regent Girdler,
Here.
Regent Hall,
Here.
Regent Higdon,
Here.
Regent McGraw,
Here.
Regent Powers,
Here.
Regent Rabinowitz, here. Regent Schaus,
Here.
Regent Stevens,
Here.
Regent Sutherland.
Here.
We have quorum.
Okay, thank you very much. I'd like to first start off and let Dr. Quarles, he's got a quick update for us.
Thank you, Chairman. And yesterday I left you with a little bit of a cliffhanger saying we have some good news, but late afternoon we received word that we got an additional $45,000 donation for both Big Sandy and Southeast, in addition to Hazard to help out with flood relief. So that comes to a grand total of $150,000 donated to help these schools and students and staff and faculty effectively back on their feet. So thank you for everybody that was involved in that. We've had one regent sign up so far to give out the game ball at girls and boys Sweet 16. So James Lee is leading the pack here. So if anybody wants to help out with the game ball presentation, and you can stand on center court with Pathfinder Fox, just let us know. And this morning had a conversation with Kofi, KSU president, and remember he's one of ours first, and he says hello. He sends us welcome. That's all I got.
James Lee just wanted to prove wrong that he is not the fox. Not the fox. Okay, let's start off with organization success, increase organization success. I'll ask Phil Neal, our Executive President and Provost, and Alan Lawson, Executive Director of Institutional Effectiveness Research and Accreditation, to present this agenda item.
Well, good morning, everybody. It's good to see everybody today. I hope you had as much fun having a great dinner last night and the camaraderie that happened around those tables, and had a good night's sleep. We're excited about this morning. I want to talk to you about two of the more puzzling words in higher education. That's strategic planning. Yeah. Well, it's kind of a play on words, because a strategic plan for any organization is somewhat of a puzzle to put together. You have to start with a vision of what we want to become in the future and what are the driving values of our organization. We're going to get to that. But then you have a lot of puzzle pieces that you have to pull together to build what will eventually be a coherent puzzle, a picture of our future together. And that starts with our leadership and our board. And so we're going to take you through a little bit of the history of how we build strategic plans at KCTCS for those of you who haven't been through one of our development cycles of a multi-year strategic plan. Our chief puzzle builder will be joining me here in just a moment, Mr. Alan Lawson, who is a guru in this kind of work and comes to us for a number of years at one of our colleges and now at our system office and our Office of Research and Policy Analysis. But a lot of the puzzle pieces that we're going to be using for building our future have been developed over the last couple of years. It's kind of an interesting look back at the last few years of what we've been through as an organization and the things that are on our table. We certainly have our existing strategic plan, where this is the third year of our 4-year strategic plan, and we've got some action items that we're engaged in as a system, and we'll be wrapping up this 4-year strategic plan next year. But within that current strategic plan, we have 16 major items that we are undertaking as a system. And then you think about the initiatives that we work with our higher ed coordinating board on. There's about 26 initiatives that CPE, the Kentucky Council for Post-Secondary Education, spearheads. We are involved in most of those 26. A few years ago, we had the report from Huron, which was a very intensive environmental scan across our system, and out of that came 47 opportunities for improvement and efficiencies in the future. And we just finished the Senate Joint Resolution 179 report, which was about an 8-month process of a very significant internal review, out of which came approximately 50 recommendations. So if you were starting to add those up, we're about 139, 140 different puzzle pieces that we can tap into for the future, some of which we've already engaged in, and some are still to come as we work with our legislature, as Dr. Quarles leads us into a new year, as we work with the board. Sometimes we'll have other initiatives that come along the way. We're going to talk about an update on one here in just a little bit on online enhancements for our student success rate. So there are a lot of puzzle pieces that we're juggling right now, trying to fit together to build this picture for the future. But to start to lay out that picture for the future, I'm going to ask Alan to come up and join and lead us through a conversation.
Thank you, Dr. Neal, and good morning, everyone. I was watching the live stream yesterday and heard a few of you all excited about potentially leaving early today, so I'm just going to jump right in, do my part there. Our current KCTCS strategic plan ends on June 30th, 2026. We do need to develop and approve a new plan to take effect the following day, July 1, 2026. This generally takes about 12 to 18 months to make all of this happen. We've got a lot of information we need to pull together. We've got a lot of stakeholders that we need to really engage with, get their input and feedback, and that does take some time. So now is really about the time to get started with that. So starting in January and February, I met with KCTCS leadership, met with the presidents, and we did the same thing we're going to do today. We reviewed the history of how we've done this at KCTCS. We looked at our policy guidance, and then we started to take a dive into our vision, mission, and values. I'm sure most of you all have worked on strategic plans before. When you're developing a strategic plan, it really stems from that very top vision statement and mission statement. So that's what we're going to do here today as well. At KCTCS, we have traditionally developed strategic plans in 6-year cycles. They align with both the legislative biennial state budget cycle as well as KCTCS budget cycle, and typically include things like goals, objectives, key performance indicators, and metrics. We also make special effort to make sure we are aligning with the statewide priorities. So the strategic agenda of CPE, the Kentucky Council on Post-Secondary Education, we try to align with the KWIB and some of these other key groups. And of course, that strategic plan is approved by this board. We went a little bit different direction with our current strategic plan. Instead of adopting another 6-year plan like we have in the past, we elected instead the KCTCS presidents, system office leadership, and this board to instead adopt 2 4-year plans. And there was 2 main reasons for that. First is that by adopting 2 4-year plans, 2022 to 2026 and 2026 to 2030, that allows us to have that same 2030 endpoint as the strategic agenda of CPE. So it makes that alignment a little bit easier. But then second, I want you all to think about what was going on in 2021 when we were developing this. We were still very much pivoting, moving things around, trying to adapt, trying to accommodate our students in the COVID-19 pandemic. So it was vital to us that we could be flexible, responsive to our workforce and community partners. So with those 2 things combined, the 2 4-year plans made a lot of sense. In addition to our strategic plan, we also developed 2-year action plans. They used to be called business plans, but what those provide are specific action strategies to help guide and direct our work. So up top, we have our strategic plan. We have those big goals: increase organization success, increase employment success, increase learner success. And we have some high-level objectives too. The action plans are a complement to that, and they provide specific strategies to help move us in the right direction to achieve those strategic planning goals and objectives. That action plan is approved by the KCTCS president and our college presidents. I want to make note of college planning efforts as well. It's not just the system-wide plan we're doing. All 16 colleges are also going to be working to develop their own strategic plans, and they need to align their plan with ours. And it's vital that we collaborate heavily throughout those processes. Not just does that make the alignment easier, but we need to get a lot of feedback. We need to talk to our workforce partners, our faculty, staff, and students, a bunch of different groups. So do the colleges. So it makes more sense to use a collaborative effort to gather that information, so we're not going to the same folks asking the same questions at about the same time. It's duplicative. It doesn't make sense. So we worked closely with the colleges back in 2021 when we developed those, and that's the plan this time as well. I also want to touch on some of the key policies that guide this work. First is Board Policy 4.9. This policy essentially authorizes Dr. Quarles to make sure that our infrastructure is in place to assess our programs, our services, and our functions. This is also the policy that has the requirement to develop an action plan that we align with budget cycles. So that's a key piece of policy there. Administrative Policy 4.9.1 provides more detail on how do we go about this process. So it identifies activities that we may want to undertake, things like focus groups, surveys, environmental scans. But just as importantly, it identifies those key stakeholders that we have to get input from, that we need to hear their voice as we develop our plan. That includes this board, the KCTCS presidents, our faculty, our staff, our students, our KCTCS Foundation Board, our local boards of directors, and those key external partners, those community agencies we work very closely with, those workforce partners. All of those individuals, we will be collecting their input and feedback as we progress. And then I also wanted to mention Board Policy 1.2 and Administrative Procedure 1.2.1. These center around the college mission statements. So approving those statements and periodically reviewing those statements. And that's not just a KCTCS requirement. The Southern Association of Colleges and Schools Commission on Colleges, SAC-COC, our accrediting body, they also require the periodic review of our mission statements. So over the next year and a half, our colleges will also be working to review their mission statements. And that will come to you all in June of 2026. You will see the process they use to evaluate that, as well as any revisions that may have happened to those mission statements. And you all will be asked to approve that again in June of 2026. And one of the reasons I bring that up is, again, we talked about, it really starts with the vision, the mission, and the values, right? That determines what our strategic plan should really be. So that's a good starting point, and that's where we've started. We did a survey last month that went out to the KCTCS leadership and the presidents, and we asked them about the vision, mission, and values. And we would like to do the same thing with you all. So I believe next week we're going to send out a survey to you all, and we want to get your input on our vision, mission, and values. So our vision statement, is it the right statement? Does it describe that aspirational future state? You know, what is our dream? And that needs to be articulated in that vision statement. The mission statement, it describes what we do and who we do it for. So is that appropriate? Does it clearly define our role and our purpose? And then, of course, the strategic plan is the roadmap to get there. So the strategic plan is how we will go about accomplishing that vision and mission. And then every bit of this is guided by our values. So on the survey that you all will get next week, are our current values the right ones? Is there some that we maybe need to add to the list? Are there some that need to be collapsed or taken away? We look forward to getting your all's feedback on that. And then I just want to start to wrap up with just a high-level timeline of how we kind of see this progressing. This is subject to change. You all may have input and we need to pivot and move in a different direction. Things may need to be pushed back or brought forward. But just to give you an overview of what we're thinking. So January through March, as I mentioned, making sure everyone is on the same page. What does policy guidance tell us? What does this look like historically? And then beginning to look at our mission, vision, and values. April through June is going to be about information collection. So Dr. Neal mentioned 47 Huron opportunities, 50 SJR recommendations, 26 CPE initiatives, of which we're at least a small part of 19. A lot of things going on. So it's really going to be pulling these pieces together, trying to synthesize them, trying to develop one cohesive plan that's streamlined and focused that we can all get behind and help move us in the direction we need to go. When we move into July and September, that's really going to be about input gathering, feedback collection. So developing surveys over the summer so that when the faculty and students are back in the fall, we can get their input. Maybe we do some focus groups. Maybe we collaborate with the colleges. The exact mechanisms we don't know yet because we need to collaborate with the colleges and try to coordinate that input gathering. We'll also be asking for feedback and input from our external stakeholders. Again, our local boards of directors, that long list of folks that I rattled off earlier. As we move into October and November, the plan should be starting to take shape by that point. We're continuing to get feedback, continuing to refine our objectives, our strategies, and starting to look at metrics. So what key performance indicators, what metrics can we look at that will be a good indicator of our progress? That process will continue into December, continuing to fine tune things. And then when we get back in January from institutional close, again, it's time to finalize the plans, right? Wordsmithing those strategies and objectives to make sure they resonate. Finalizing those metrics, looking at trend data and finalizing our targets. And then ultimately bringing those plans to leadership here at the system office, leadership at the colleges, getting their blessing on that, and then coming to you all in March of 2026 to review and hopefully approve that strategic plan. So you may wonder, if we need to implement this in July, why are we trying to get it approved and done by March? And the reason is we want it really in January and February and March to have our plan largely together, because that will allow us to better inform budget development efforts. That's an important connection to make. And then also, we want to give time for any marketing work around this area. Do we want a communication plan around our new strategic plan? So those types of activities. And then ultimately, it will be approved and implemented, or excuse me, implemented on July 1st of 2026. So Dr. Neal, I think you had a little bit more.
So Alan mentioned the upcoming survey that we'll be getting out to you all to start gathering your individual input on this. I hope that as you drive home today, whether it's just a few minutes around the corner or several hours drive, I hope this will be on your mind when you go home. And I just wanted to give you a chance to think through a couple of things that we will be asking on there. Whether you share any thoughts today is up to you. But be thinking about the big picture, the dream. 5, 10 years from now, what do you want KCTCS to look like? What do you hope we're able to achieve? What does that dream state look like for you? And then also, what values are driving that vision that you have? One of the things that I think is absolutely enduring are value systems. They don't change typically very easily. Our strategies day to day can change, but our values tend to be deep-seated and enduring. So I want you to be thinking about the kind of values that you believe should be driving our institution and that dream state-like environment. So as I say that, is there anything that comes to mind? Is there any word that jumps out or any concept that pops up in your mind? Doesn't have to be well articulated at this point. It's just, it's kind of a Wordle exercise in some ways as we throw all these things together and get people's input. Well, if you're still noodling on that, please do. I hope it sticks with you for a few days and you really start to contemplate that, because you will be asked for input on that survey. And again, we'll gather that input and bring it all together as we start to put these puzzle pieces together. Any questions for Alan or me as we wrap up this portion?
Is the goal of this plan to be more system oriented?
Yes, this will be a system strategic plan, and then each college is responsible for building their local plan that is in alignment and mirrors in many ways the goals and the big picture of our entire system.
Yeah, but if we were sequencing it, this comes first
It
and then
does.
they're developed.
It comes first and side by side,
Okay.
because until we have this starting to take shape, they don't know what to align to. And so, but this is, as Alan was saying, a very collaborative effort that we will have input from it across the entire system on as we pull this together. But then the colleges have always had their own strategic plan that align. Typically, what you'll see more at the local level that might be nuanced a little bit more is some local strategies, maybe some recruitment strategies, some scholarship fundraising strategies that might be local to their community. Louisville has done some of this work that's very exciting. We just heard from Evolve 502 the other day. That may be unique to Louisville, or we may take a different version of that and copy that in other areas. But that would be a local effort that we may not necessarily do it on a grand scale or that specifically, but it's in alignment that will all lead us towards our goals. If that answers your question.
Yeah, I just think, how far you take these kinds of plans, the fine line is where it morphs into the individual facility, but it sounds like it's both and.
It is.
Good luck with that.
Thank you.
I'm excited about this. Have you all been in part of an organization where the strategic plan is not used or ignored, or you don't know what it is? I think I've, in past organizations, et cetera, I've been in those situations. And what I'm excited about here is this is a chance for us to dovetail and bring together all the work that's happened before, all these studies, our path forward, our relationship with General Assembly, SJR here, and have one path forward and put it all together in one nice package. And the great thing about strategic plans that are used is that they don't give you answers. They give you the questions that should be asked at every major decision. And you can clearly go back and say, is this in alignment with our overall goal? And so I'm excited about this. I would encourage you all to noodle, as you said, over the values. We actually did a PLT exercise on this recently, and you'd be surprised by how much consensus was already in the room about where we need to go. And so please be part of this. I'm excited about this. Sometimes it's hard to get excited about strategic planning. I am, because I think that with the direction our organization is going to go, having a clear, thought out, collaborative and input-based strategic plan is going to be very healthy for this organization.
And I would ask you to think bold, and let's stay focused. Thank you all.
Thank you all. Appreciate it. Great presentation. Look forward to working with it. We'll now ask Dr. Megan Smith, Chief Advancement Officer, to present this agenda item for philanthropy.
Well, I love coming after strategic planning because that is so key to everything we do in advancement. You'll hear a lot of terms used, fundraising, philanthropy, but I feel like advancement is when we're truly at our best, where we're using those philanthropic resources to drive towards that shared strategy and common goals. So we're really excited to see that process unfold. So I have some data for you. I apologize in advance. I'm a bit of a data nerd, but I think this is so important to help you all understand not only what's happening currently in our fundraising efforts, but where we're headed, again, as we work to be more strategic and help KCTCS accomplish its goals, both as a system and at the college level. As you'll see here, this chart breaks out fundraising both at the college and the foundation levels through the fiscal year so far. As a friendly reminder, donors can give in 4 different ways. They can give directly to their college, directly to their college's foundation, they can give to KCTCS, and they can give to the KCTCS Foundation. So it is a complex fundraising ecosystem that we have here, but we believe it's important to offer donors ways to be accessible and convenient for them. As you'll see in some of these numbers, we're a little bit behind where we were at this time last year. I'll say that our January and February numbers are still changing. Some of that data gets put in a few months behind. So we anticipate seeing some growth in those numbers specifically. But we also knew last year was a pretty high watermark for us in terms of fundraising. So we are still shooting to be at or above that level. And with our Giving Day still to come, a lot of larger endowment gifts that typically come in between December and March, with our endowment match deadline coming up. We do know there's some additional growth ahead and look forward to working with those donors. These numbers are important, but they're really more of a lagging measure that shows, what the big picture is, but we really need data to be able to drill down into the health of our overall development program. So when you think about leading measures of success in fundraising, it really comes through this more holistic approach of looking at how we grow our donor base and progress these relationships intentionally. Sometimes people think that fundraising is just this magic thing that only certain people can do, or either you got it or you don't, or you just say this right thing to sell to a certain donor. But really, fundraising is a balance between art and science, and it doesn't happen by accident. It's a very intentional progression of relationships, and I hope this pyramid here helps you see how we are trying to work to not only gather prospective donors and engage them in our work, but convert them through a longer-term process to add longer value to our work and deepen that relationship as they hopefully make that first gift, continue to give, and hopefully progress towards making more planned gifts, major gifts, and ultimately those endowed gifts that really help give us the flexibility and certainty of resources that we can count on to be able to adapt and continue to meet our mission. So, this is a really important, lens for us to look at our work through. And as you see data from us moving forward, we're going to have multiple data points that show the health of our giving in each of those areas. Here you'll see some numbers for things like our new donors, because again, that's key to look at how we're bringing people into connection across KCTCS. But more importantly, you're going to see a lot more focus from us on retention. When you look at national philanthropic numbers, of all philanthropy, about 75% comes from individuals. That's amazing. Sometimes people think it's more the big corporate gifts and the big foundations, and you hear about those major gifts often. But the meat and potatoes of philanthropy is still about that individual donor who maybe joins by giving $100 at their first time giving. As a sector, we're not real great at being able to retain those donors. Nationally, retention's around 35%. So that means we have a leaky bucket, as you might envision it, where we're bringing in new donors, but we want to make sure that, again, we're creating an experience for them that retains and helps grow that relationship. Across KCTCS, we have over 414,000 records in our donor database. That's alumni, that's former donors, current donors. It's a huge, massive data, which again is why I get so excited about the tools we have at our disposal to help focus in on those different constituent groups and leverage the time and energy of our relatively lean and mean development offices. We've got about 50 employees in advancement across the system. So as you can imagine, that's about 8,000 potential constituents per person in advancement, which is greater than the enrollment at some colleges. So it really is a huge lift to make sure that we have strategies in place that speak to those donors in the way that they want to be communicated with, that is meaningful and engaging to them. So again, there is a lot of technology that goes into this, some of the tools that we're trying to leverage in that database to, again, help inform our advancement officers at the college level and their teams about how to spend their most valuable resource, which is their time and energy. So that is where we're going to be heading into as we look at strategic planning for the KCTCS Foundation, and as we start the new academic year, really digging into that data, creating more constituent groups, looking at data that aligns with each of those populations so that we can know as we progress through that pyramid if our efforts are being successful and not just waiting to look at seeing how the big numbers of giving are doing, on that monthly or annual basis. So there is still a lot to celebrate as we look at philanthropy's impact across the system. We received towards the end of 2024 a $300,000 scholarship that was given to KCTCS that will impact all of the colleges and was very flexible in the criteria we have. So we really appreciate when donors trust us and believe in us enough to be able to help students where they need it most. So that will be a new scholarship rolling out this spring to be awarded for students in the fall. I also want to give a big shout out to Bluegrass Community and Technical College. They received a large gift to help support the renovation of their new Winchester campus. And Gateway also received a $10,000 gift to support skilled trades. So it's wonderful to see the investment in our technical programs and workforce development efforts. There's also an $18,000 scholarship that's going to benefit students attending ACTC at Ashland. And again, a lot of flexibility built into that scholarship. So why I think that's important for you is that it means the donor trusts us to work with their hard-earned dollars and fill gaps, again, meeting students where they are and where they need us most. Hopkinsville has had a wonderful anniversary campaign, a 60 for 60 campaign to celebrate their 60th anniversary. And we're able to use those funds to buy a freezer for their food pantry. So I share this with you because, again, sometimes we think of philanthropy as putting a name on a building, and we are going to talk about that here in a minute, how that can be done now, hopefully. But it's also sometimes things as small as donating freezers, donating food to food pantries. And we are looking forward, as Dr. Quarles mentioned yesterday, to making that more of a centralized landing point for how you can learn to give in-kind gifts like vehicles, equipment, and supplies. I know we have no shortage of needs for things like freezers and things that might not seem high dollar, but can really go a long way to helping our student-facing programs achieve their goals. Although we have looked at some numbers today, I think it's really important to make sure that we never lose sight that each of these dollars that donors trust us with ultimately is here to impact students. And this is just one testimonial from a student at HCC who had great things to say about how philanthropy impacted their journey and allowed them to stay focused on their educational goals, not having to worry about crises that had come up, was able to be served by their food pantry. So again, anytime you hear from me, you're going to hear why this work matters. And it's not, none of us get into fundraising because it's glamorous. It's hard work, but it's these stories that keep us motivated. I'm really excited to share that when I put these slides together, we have to do that pretty far in advance. And as you heard this morning, we've had so many additional gifts come in that we have been able to support the recovery for communities at Big Sandy, Southeast, and Hazard. Those colleges and their foundations have worked so hard. They deserve tons of credit, not only for participating in fundraising efforts through this crisis, but also responding to those student needs. So So I just can't say enough great things about their work to keep students at the forefront through this flood recovery. But if you still would like to donate, the challenge that they now face is that a lot of those emergency funds that the foundation's already held can be depleted through these types of crises. So we can never have enough student emergency funding. So we will always welcome gifts to support the ability for foundations to recover and respond quickly when students have a need. As Dr. Neal mentioned, I also want to make sure every time we get to be together that you hear about somebody who is making this work possible, because I'm a firm believer in people don't give to us, they don't give to me, they don't give to any of our leadership here, they give through us. We are the vehicle that allows donors to make the impact that they want to have. And one of those key partners is Evolve 502. Evolve works primarily in Jefferson County to support Promise Scholarships for JCPS students who have the option to come for 2 years tuition-free to KCTCS or Simmons College. And we're seeing more of those students branch out and attend multiple KCTCS colleges. You'll see here, this is one of the largest partners we have at the KCTCS Foundation, that they have invested over $4 million in students, and those students have leveraged an additional $12 million in other financial aid. And that's a great feature of those last dollar scholarships, where students can use existing resources like Pell and Work Ready, but then we can fill in any gaps with the help of philanthropy and those scholarship donations. So what this means for KCTCS, that is over 2,200 students have been served and earned nearly 770 credentials. So when we talk about strategic alignment between philanthropy and KCTCS goals, either at the college or the system level, this is a perfect example of how a partner helps us get closer to accomplishing our mission and helping students, have that access and ultimately that support as they progress through their academic journey. Finally, I couldn't have a mic and not ask for money. We would love the Board of Regents' participation in our upcoming Giving Day campaign. I will say that our goal for Giving Day, I'll just put this out here right now. A lot of times you see organizations just trying to raise more and more money. Again, I think our job is to build a healthy development program that has goals and metrics infused throughout it. So hopefully, yes, money is the end result, but our goal with Giving Day is a little different. We view this as an important tool for donor acquisition, as well as to encourage existing donors to try to give earlier in the year so that we can encourage our donors that need more follow-up. We can focus on those later in the calendar year to help, again, our small teams be able to be as effective as they can with their resources. So our goal isn't typically to just try to raise more money. We did have $1.5 million last year, so that's a pretty high bar. $1 million of that did come from a single donor. So our goals are much more focused on new donor acquisition, dollars from new donors. And this, again, helps us operationalize a lot of the new technology. We're using a new platform that you'll see this year. So it'll be a much richer multimedia experience where you can hear from student videos, photos on our giving pages. So there's a lot of value in this type of campaign to help organize our giving efforts across the system. And I appreciate all the work that the colleges have put in to prepare for this campaign and try to make it even better than ever. How you can help is to join us as an ambassador. We will have an ambassador toolkit coming soon, so we would love for you to share this information on your social media channels. If you plan to make a gift, this is a great time to do it. And you are also welcome to offer a challenge or a match. I've got some examples here of what a challenge or a match could look like. For example, I'm still in a shared capacity with Elizabethtown Community and Technical College, and our cabinet is offering a match to our employee emergency fund so that any donor that gives will have up to $500 in matching fund for that particular program. We also have some fun, exciting challenges out there where we will be able to give, for example, $1,000 to the program or the college that has the most participation from alumni, or the most participation in terms of just sheer number of donors that day. So we can really position matches and challenges in ways that are convenient and meaningful to you. And it's a great way to inspire others with your generosity. So that's something we can customize based on your interest. Again, if you're planning on giving anyway on Giving Day, want to get the biggest bang for your investment, we would love to talk with you about how to turn that into a challenge that engages others in this campaign. So any questions for me?
I'd like to make a quick statement. So last year, if you all noticed, all 14 regents did answer the challenge. So that challenge will be again this year. I'm making that challenge to all of the regents to make sure that they donate something to the Giving Day. So Dr. Stith, hopefully we'll have 14 up there next year.
I'll be in the corner if you want to talk. Ready to go.
So any questions?
Just curious, what is the estimated total cost for a student to go through 2 years? If donors wanted to underwrite or sponsor a student?
Well, 80% of our students get financial aid of some sort, so it depends on the situation. But if you look at just pure cost, if you're pay out of pocket, it's about $5,000 per year. So 10 grand. That's just ballparking it. But the interesting thing is we've had a lot of success with the last dollar donations as well. That really stretches that donation to help out multiple students.
If you said 60 hours times 200, that would get you a good ballpark. Any other questions?
Just a few comments. I want to say thank you to Dr. Stith and her staff as well as our counterparts across the system. They do a great job. In every PLT meeting, we start with celebrations, and they're usually dominated by interesting gifts given to the colleges. So we appreciate that. And she has recently been named Chief Advancement Officer for the KCTCS Foundation. So congratulations, Dr. Stith.
Thank you. We have a long to-do list, but I'm excited to keep working.
And just I want to say thank you to our foundation board chairwoman, Stephanie Bell. Many of you all know her, and our KCTCS Board of Regents chair serves on that in that capacity as well. I mentioned last dollar promise scholarships. We currently have 6 counties in Kentucky that fundraise for a local county-based promise. So you heard about Evolve 502, which is amazing. And if you didn't pick up on it, just because you graduate from a Jefferson County high school doesn't mean you have to go to JCTC. In fact, a lot of these students are going to other colleges as well. I know in Christian County, the local Rotary does an annual fundraiser that funds completely a last dollar scholarship. We also have one in McCracken County. Webster, I think, is another one, but a total of 6. And so that's another strategy we're trying to do is county by county, figuring out how much would it cost to get there, try to find innovative ways to shore this up as well. Don't forget, in September, I'll be hosting a clay shoot for a foundation fundraiser as well, if you want to be part of that. We're also going through a legal review right now with our foundation boards as well to make sure that we're on proper standing. And the last thing I have is that we hope to get a donation initiative up. I mentioned it yesterday in the president's report to have a more structured donation, I guess, pitch across the state, especially for our technical programs if people want to donate things besides money. So that's what we're working on.
Dr. Stith, you want to talk about naming buildings?
I will. We do have an action item today. We did a few meetings ago adopt a new name for a building at Sky in recognition of a donor. But that process that we went through really identified that we needed to revisit this policy and procedure and make sure that it was in alignment with our most current needs, since as you'll see on the date, it hasn't been updated in about 20 years. So the changes that we're recommending today, the primary change is to remove the 25% value requirement for a gift to be eligible for naming. For example, if you have a $10 million building and a donor wants to give to include naming rights in that building, the gift they previously would have had to make would have to be at least 25% of the value of that building. And I know over that last 20 years, there have been cases where we've lost opportunities for major gifts because they did not meet that requirement. This updated policy also delineates between buildings named for private donors and also having functional names that rest with authority in the college president to name, so that, for example, if we need to have a parking garage garage built on campus, you don't have to vote necessarily on naming that parking garage a parking garage because it has a functional capacity. So the Board of Regents would still retain your authority to name buildings for private individuals or donors, but this updated policy, again, gives a little more flexibility for the colleges to work with donors, develop giving plans that work for them, which would still be documented in an additional named facilities agreement. So there is still, a legal element to this to ensure that everybody's expectations are met, and ultimately the board would have the opportunity to approve those requests. So I'm happy to entertain any questions that you have about consideration of this updated policy.
Any questions about this policy? If none, we need to have a motion that the KCTCS Board of Regents approve the revisions to the Board of Regents Policy 7.10, naming of buildings and facilities for private donors. Do we have a motion? Chris Girdler,
Second.
Brianna? Parliamentarians to go?
Chair Martin,
Yes.
Vice Chair Hamilton,
Yes.
Secretary Witten. Yes. Regent Cox,
Yes.
Regent Girdler, Regent Hall,
Yes.
Regent Higdon,
Yes.
Regent McGraw,
Yes.
Regent Powers, Regent Rabinowitz. Yes. Regent Schaus,
Yes.
Regent Stevens,
Yes.
Regent Sutherland.
Yes.
The motion passes with Regent Powers being not present.
Thank you, Dr. Stitt.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Thank you for all your hard work and congratulations on your new job. Okay, we finished up a few of the next items yesterday, so let's go to increase employment success. We'll ask Vice President of Workforce and Economic Development, Jesse Shook, to present this agenda item.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm excited that I have a voice this time and can share some really great updates from our workforce development team with you all today. So at our last meeting, Megan, thank you again for presenting for me. I lost my voice at the SWAT event. SWAT stands for the Statewide Workforce and Talent Team. And you all have been hearing about this concept since I've been giving you reports dating back to 2022. The original sort of concept for SWAT was called the Collaborative Business Outreach Team. And the idea was to bring together workforce practitioners from multiple organizations across the state, which include education providers, our career centers, our nonprofits such as Goodwill and others like Goodwill in our local communities who engage in workforce development, and many other entities like chambers of commerce, our ad districts, to come together, knowing that we're all working with businesses every single day to attempt to simplify the way in which we interact with these companies. It can be very complicated. Anyone who has been in the private sector, who has been in an HR role, can attest to this. When you have dozens and dozens of organizations knocking on your door, likely with products that could very much help with your talent attraction, retention, and development challenges. However, it's difficult to understand, where do I invest my time? What does all of this mean? We lovingly refer to the current state as something like a plate of spaghetti, and we are trying to work through that dish and move it towards something that's easier to understand, like a lasagna. And I know that that's a little bit of a silly metaphor, but we've had companies tell us, for example, a company in Northern Kentucky, it took years and years to build their portfolio of partners to assist with their talent needs. Once that individual moved, they opened a location in Lincoln Trail and then another in Green River. She had a very difficult time understanding where to start. Who do I go to? Who can help me navigate this system? Where do I invest my time and resources in order to really impact the pain points that are keeping me up at night? And so SWAT is sort of the next iteration of that collaborative business outreach team. And the wonderful thing about the model as it stands today is that we have leadership buy-in from the major workforce institutions across the Commonwealth. So Dr. Quarles attends these meetings alongside Dr. Thompson and his Vice President of Workforce, Ashley Watts from the Chamber of Commerce, Secretary Knoll from the Cabinet for Economic Development, Secretary Link from the Education and Labor Cabinet, and the list goes on and on. This is the first time in my 10-year career in this space in particular that those leaders have prioritized meeting on a monthly basis to ensure that we are working towards a common mission and vision of workforce success for Kentucky. So we hosted a convening in December. Over 90 workforce and education organizations from across the state were represented at that event. More than 200 folks in attendance, kicked off by the governor. You see an image there of Dr. Quarles with some of the other leaders, Ashley Watts, Secretary Link on a panel. And then we also had an employer panel. And it was very interesting because after day one, most of the local workforce areas, the regional collaboratives that are already meeting and doing great kind of partnership and collaboration approaches, thought everything is really going well and we don't have much room for improvement, right? We love to think that we're great and we don't really have a lot to work on. Day two, those employers spoke to us and they shared some feedback. And in order to really embrace the spirit of continuous improvement, we need to hear that feedback directly from companies. And you're going to hear this as a thread and a theme throughout my comments to you all today to ensure that we are doing better. We are making it easier for them to navigate this system. And there was a shift in energy in day two. And at the end, we had put up those kind of large Post-it boards at the exit area and had the local areas sign their commitment to moving forward with this SWAT model. And we are very excited that several regions, they're not waiting for the state. They've already gone on and embraced this model. And when they meet with companies, they are ensuring that their partners and all assets are involved and represented. And what that means is that, and Blair, no amount of marketing dollars can come close to touching the impact of that trusted partner relationship, and knowing that when the chamber meets with the company, the chamber does not offer customized training, but they know we do because we're linked arms with them in the way that we serve businesses. They're going to refer to us. They don't have necessarily students that they're trying to place in internships. We do. Right? They're going to make that connection. The career centers are going to make that connection. If an employer comes to us and they need a bulk of employees and maybe a lower skill level position that we don't necessarily train for, we're going to make a connection for them and serve them in that capacity. So this is really a holistic approach to serving companies. And I'm excited that you're going to see some prototypes coming out of this group. We have several in the works, one in healthcare, one in manufacturing. And the goal of those prototypes is that the employers are helping us to provide real-time feedback so that we can continue to improve this process. Simplification, consistency, and a customer service focus, because our students win when we're deeply partnered with businesses. We've got some other amazing partnerships. You all saw the invitations yesterday out on the tables to our next Education First Employer event. That's an announcement of Goodwill joining us as an Education First Employer partner. You all recall that those partners are providing flexible scheduling. They're deeply engaged with us in other types of institutional activities, potentially helping us to recruit faculty or providing equipment for our technical spaces. So they're not just transactional partnerships. They're offering education benefits, good wages. This is a chance for us to capitalize on those dollars allocated from companies to advance the educational attainment in our state. And so Goodwill is going to be joining us. We have now more than 60 companies across the state who are investing with us in this capacity. Goodwill is a really interesting employer because there's something like an Education First Employer Plus. They also offer coaching, wraparound support services, barrier removal. They've got funding and they've got capacity. When somebody has an issue with their car that could prevent them from going to school or work, Goodwill has the resources to assist that individual. They also have really significant programming around second chance employment. So individuals who've been involved with the justice system who may be exiting, preparing to exit, that's going to be a pillar for us moving forward to serve that population. That population matters in our workforce. Giving folks a second chance matters to Kentucky. And by adding them as an employer to our portfolio, we will be able to better serve and train that demographic. And that is also in conjunction with our existing partnership with Family Scholar House. So we would love to see any of you all who are in the area on March 21st at the Opportunity Center. Dr. Quarles mentioned we have announced a scholarship partnership with the Boys and Girls Club of Kentucky, and we are looking at how do we deepen that in the coming years as well to capitalize on very strong partnerships between local clubs and colleges. And then our Going Pro, our second Going Pro event, we're kicking that off on the 4th at the Rotunda at the Capitol. This year, the Kentucky Department of Education is joining us in this effort. Now, they already host some signing events in the same way we did before we developed a common brand standard around Going Pro. But the really exciting thing about this is it's positioning us to showcase these partnerships, to showcase that we're working with KDE and that Kentucky is prioritizing career pathways. Kentucky is prioritizing the integration of the education system with our local labor market. And we are hopeful that we had millions of views in the media last year. I envision that this, you turn on your CBS Evening News and you are seeing this reported on national news because Kentucky is coming together to say, here with us, your education leads you to a pro career in the Commonwealth. And then we also have a very exciting event series. I think Regent Girdler, you will appreciate this, to deepen our relationship with economic developers. So we've worked with KDE for years and years, but it's been more of a transactional, and there's nothing wrong with that, a transactional relationship, more about attending each other's conferences. We do have great relationships with our colleges and their local area economic developers, but we want to take that to the next level. So we'll be bringing in national site selectors. We will be bringing in different leaders from other states to learn about what they're doing. And the idea is that we're going to engage around deal breakers and deal makers in workforce development to help our teams get in the mindset of a site selector, to think about what for them is going to say, is going to help them get to Kentucky is the place to go, because they don't just have the numbers. We can all put forward quantitative data on our labor market. What is that collaborative, that qualitative information that makes them say Kentucky's at the top of my list because of their workforce? And so that's the aim there. We will have 2 of those events, one on the east side and one on the west side, and those will be coming this summer. And then Keith, is my video in the next slide? Okay, so just a quick video about our Going Pro. So a little bit of credit here to the marketing team for putting this together. And we got to give credit where credit's due. Dr. Quarles was the one who originally put forward the March Madness idea. Now, we can't coin it that due to copyright challenges, but I think it really fits well with the Going Pro idea. And we're excited to see where this grows from this year and beyond. We can see these signing events, drafting, really creating buzz leading up to signing season in Kentucky. So again, this year, April really marks our signing season. And then in May, you're going to see that media circuit dominated by KDE, also utilizing the Going Pro brand to showcase their high schoolers coming out of CTE pathways. I'm so sorry for the small numbers. I'm going to give you the highlights here. I'm not going to make you schedule your eye doctor appointment right after this. I know that it's small. What I want you to see from this slide, this is the asset map data. These are our employer partnerships across the system. It has taken us time to get to a place where we can say who we are working with at all 16 colleges, between departments, and how are we working with them, in what capacity. So you can see there is a long list of activities. The block on I used to teach yoga and I'm very bad at left and right. The Q2 block, the lighter colored block, shows our last numbers, and then the yellow block shows our most recent numbers. And what I want to zoom in on here is the fact that some of the highest impact partnership activities are increasing in number. So those would include training for incumbent workers. That could be via trains or through a direct pay process, tuition assistance. We are adding more companies quarter to quarter who are providing our students with tuition support. Internships and advisory board engagement, those critical activities are increasing quarter over quarter. Now, we've been using the number 3,000 partnerships. You'll see that this is a little bit lower. This is a good thing. These numbers are going to ebb and flow. What it means is that we are looking at our data and we are critically assessing, is this a transformational partnership? We still love when companies want to hire our students, but the fact is the best way to impact strong and versatile talent pipelines is through collaboration. And that requires engagement from both employers and educators to do that well. So we are eliminating more transactional data from the system. We still have stock of that data, but again, what we're interested here is mutually beneficial goals between employers and educators. So a shout out to Dr. Stith and her team who worked with Kyla Smithers, who leads this project for the system office, because we had several donors when we had integrated foundation data in there, right? That is transformational, supporting our students in that capacity. We had 5 years old data that were minor donations here and there. Again, we're eliminating that to focus on the highest impact partnership. Each of the colleges has an external engagement team made up of leaders of our critical divisions who focus on student activities, student capacity building through employer partnerships. And they meet to talk about this data. They meet to look at where do we have gaps and where can we capitalize on each other's relationships to work smarter, not harder in the way we deepen our partnerships. I do want to say that Kyla Smithers is on her way back from Chicago. She was awarded this week the Changemaker in Higher Education Award for the work that she has done in this space. She was one of 3 finalists across the state at that Salesforce conference. So the work that she is doing here is really unprecedented and sets us apart from the pack in terms of tracking our engagement with this critical stakeholder group. And so what is the next step? We know how much we're doing. We know who we're doing it with. We know across divisions how we are working with these companies, across colleges how we are working with these companies. When we think about just simple results-based accountability, we now want to ask how well are we doing it, with the intent of then growing that step into, is anyone better off as a result of these activities? And so again, this is small here, but you'll see this is a snapshot from a Harvard survey that we're going to be utilizing. We're going to be abbreviating it and sending that out this spring. This will be our first since, Scott, I think you told me at least in a decade, the first time at a system level, we have asked for feedback across employers. And so I want to commend Dr. Quarles for prioritizing that, because it is very important to ask your customers how you're doing, right? And so we will know how they feel, their satisfaction level in terms of critical partnership activities, and we'll use that to benchmark growth quarter to quarter. So we're not only looking at numbers, we are looking at satisfaction levels. We also continue to collect trains feedback. I won't belabor you with reading this here, but not only do we continue to do quantitative train surveys to ensure that our clients are satisfied with our customized training projects, we ask for that qualitative feedback, staying connected and looped in with those companies, touch points happening at most colleges every quarter to ensure that their training needs are met, and they really view us as an extension of their learning and development arms. And then you saw in Todd's report yesterday an overview of the trains numbers. Here, I want to give you a snapshot last year to this year. So this is, again, obviously reporting on the prior quarter. So quarter 2 of FY24 and then through quarter 2 of FY25. You'll see here that we are seeing an increase year over year in the number of projects. That is thanks to an allocation by Dr. Quarles to allocate an additional $2 million to the trains funding. We would be no longer taking projects right now at this moment if we did not have that additional allocation, or we would have to change the funding model, which we know has worked to improve the number of people we're training and the number of businesses in our portfolio. You do see a decrease there in new companies, and I'll talk about that in just a moment because we are going to be addressing that. Our repeat companies year-over-year growth 63%. The total project cost is up around 12%. Average project amount is down 16%. That's because we made changes that projects could only be 6 months in duration, and then colleges could submit a new approval to extend that to ensure that we're not encumbering funds for one particular business, knowing that the demand for this continues to go up. And then projected headcount is down just 1%. We're not concerned about that and anticipate with the number of projects that have come in these last couple of months that we are going to see a year-over-year overall growth in most of these areas. Now, the new company space, we are addressing that. We know we cannot serve more companies without additional staff. Even if we were out there selling more, and quite frankly, this partnership with the SWAT leaders where we are cross-referring to each other is increasing that funnel. Our marketing, our improved marketing strategy in this space is increasing the funnel. We have to have project managers. They're not just sales folks. They are project managers that are helping to shepherd and deliver the training. And so we have a model at Owensboro Community and Technical College called FlexTrain. FlexTrain is an online system that allows us to do both fully online and hybrid delivery of training. Owensboro has built a portfolio of hundreds of companies, some across the country, who utilize this again as a training of their an extension of their learning and development departments. And so we're going to be piloting FlexTrain with Gateway and Maysville. We'll have a liaison that works between Owensboro, Gateway, and Maysville to expand capacity in that project manager sense. And we will be looking at metrics every 6 and 12 months to determine, is this a viable approach to serving additional companies without asking every single college to take on additional staff in this space? We're really looking at how we can innovate here to expand our clients served without adding a cost burden at the colleges. So we'll be reporting back on this at the next board meeting. And then finally, I would like to invite my colleague, Dr. Kelly Selvage, to the podium. She'll be closing out this report with an update on our nursing optimization project.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for the opportunity to come and talk about this great work that we're doing. I came to this position at Systems Office in 2022, and the nursing workforce has been one of the high conversations for the last 2.5 years, mainly around workforce and workforce development coming out of COVID and the outflow of the nursing workforce, and really the focus on how are we increasing enrollment in nursing programs. And that comes with a lot of caveats. But with all of the work being done at Systems Office, Dr. Quarles asked, how do we what can we do here across our colleges at KCTCS to really impact the nursing workforce? And so a lot of that comes with a lot of the other work being done on how do we share resources, how do we work together more as a system to support our current students, bring in more enrollment, have the capacity to sustain and scale these highly needed workforce roles. And so back in the fall, we kind of developed a plan on how to bring our 16 college nursing programs together to start looking at streamlining processes and procedures and resources to both be able to increase enrollment, support current students, work through faculty issues that we're having. Almost all of our colleges are down nursing faculty and trying to get nursing faculty because there is a shortage in those, and to help support students across our state with flexibility within their programs and ensuring we're not putting barriers there for students into nursing. So we created 4 work groups to start this, and just checking my numbers. So all 16 colleges are participating in these nursing work groups. 21 of our nurse leaders across the colleges are working on these groups. And there are a total of 53 nursing faculty that participate on these 4 work groups. So it is a system-wide approach to how we can streamline and build sustainable and scalable programs for nursing. The first work group is looking at nursing program policies. And so with Senate Bill 10, there was this huge talk about empty seats. And if this program's full, how do we shift them into another program that has space? But across our state, whether it's our programs or BSN programs, admission criteria is different everywhere. What you have to get into a nursing program, prerequisites and courses and all of that isn't standard. And so how can we as KCTCS and our colleges really be the leader on moving work forward to streamline that for people in the Commonwealth who want to become nurses? Kentucky Board of Nursing recently came out and said they're going to look at how to streamline and set a state standard on admission. And we've already kind of gone down that pathway to be the leaders in that. But there are a lot of policies that impact clinical and background check, drug screens and things like that that have been high priority for even our leaders at our colleges, as there have been changes with medical marijuana and accessibility for students that we've even had to bring general counsel in to get input in. So being able to streamline those policies so that we're being consistent across our state with our program on how we're approaching those students is really important. We've also been looking at our nurse faculty workload as we kind of delved into why are we having trouble with hiring nurse faculty? Why are we having trouble with retaining them when we do hire them? We really looked at workloads. And I shared a recent article that I found with PLT recently about an experienced nurse clinician at the bedside, whether they've had 10 years or 20 years of experience. When you hire them as a nurse faculty, they are novice. The skill sets are not the same. And so we can't equate this really qualified RN that's been working at the bedside is now going to step in a classroom and have the skills that they need to teach the next generation of nurses, right? And so we are really looking at workloads from when a new nurse faculty comes in and how, what does that need to look like? Are we consistent across our programs? And what we're finding is if you're a nurse faculty at one college, your workload's going to be this. If you're at another college, it's going to be this. And how do we ensure we're being consistent and fair to all of our faculty? The third one is onboarding. So again, that retention aspect and how do we make sure if we are hiring in new faculty that we are supporting them. We're not just throwing them out there into the classroom and hoping that they make it, because that not only doesn't retain that faculty, it impacts our students' ability to be successful because they don't have the right support in that faculty member to help them through a very rigorous nursing program. So how do we ensure that the people we're putting in that classroom with those students have the best resources and ability to do what they need to do to support our students? And so we're building a whole Blackboard organization with different resources and training opportunities to really make sure that we're giving these new faculty the best chance at being successful in the classroom. It's very much in alignment with some asks from the Kentucky Hospital Association around clinical instructors. Again, one of the barriers to enrolling more students is having enough clinical instructors in the hospital settings and the healthcare settings with them. And a lot of that also goes back to training. And because a lot of those clinical educators are newer nurses that are working out there at the bedside and may not feel like they have what they need to train someone else quite yet. So from this project, we will be working with Kentucky Hospital Association to build training for clinical instructors that are out there in the facilities that want to come and be adjunct clinical instructors for us. And then lastly, we are working with mainly our nurse leaders. The groups are very mixed on regulatory and accreditory reporting. So as you know, Kentucky Board of Nursing has annual reports on all of our programs. That information is publicly available on their websites. But as we kind of look at that annual report, the way people perceive what's being asked is very different. So even though you may see all of that information, it may not all be the same. And so for KCTCS, we wanted to make sure that how Bluegrass reported their numbers is the same as how Jefferson or Maysville, that it's all very consistent in how we report. And so we went through line by line of the KBN annual report. There were lots of questions and clarification that we needed. So we actually met as a group with the Kentucky Board of Nursing nurse educators just the end of February, was that last 2 weeks ago? And kind of asked them our questions to get clarity. And then last week I met with our partners here at ORPA to walk through, this is what they're asking. Can you build us reports? Because right now the nurse leaders at the colleges have Excel spreadsheets where they are manually tracking every student, and are they completing on time, and when did they come in, and when did they graduate, and what are their demographics? To answer all of these questions. It's taking a lot of administrative time on these nurse leaders. And so the more that we can automate that and be able to make it very seamless for them to get this reporting and get it consistently year over year and from campus to campus, take some of that burden off of them and puts them back with the faculty and with the students. Same thing with accreditation. All of our ADN programs were accredited, but recently KBN came out and said it was a requirement. Up until a couple of years ago, it was not required to have nursing accreditation. It was just recommended, but it is now a requirement. And many of our practical nursing programs were not accredited. And so they are all living and breathing, as many of you see, many of the presidents shaking their heads, living that accreditation process right now. And so with that, all of our campuses are going through the same questions and processes, and what does this mean, and what's the documentation I need. And so we're coming together and kind of creating a process manual, walking through those criteria and credentials. This is where you can find this. This is your supporting documents that you can pull, to make it very streamlined for we've had a lot of nurse administrator turnover. For even a new nurse administrator to come in and say, I've got an accreditation visit in 6 months. Sorry, this is the process that I need to go through. Here are the questions, and here's a group of people that can help me with this, so we don't all feel like they're out there alone. And then in April, both the ADN and the practical nursing curriculum committee meetings will happen, and that conversation will be around streamlining our curriculum. So currently our ADN program has 4 different curriculum pathways. A student that starts in one cannot move to another one. So if you start your nursing career at Maysville and now your significant other gets a job and you're transferring to Bowling Green, you might have to start your nursing career all over again with KCTCS, because those courses would not transfer because our content is structured differently. And so we're going to start down that pathway of how do we streamline that to make sure that a student that goes from one side of our state to the other would not lose credit, would not lose any time or money to continue their degree. Similarly, we have a lot of bridge programs into our ADN program, which are amazing to have. Military medics, paramedics. Gateway is even offering some for other allied health programs into nursing. And even though those are shown in our catalog, they are not available at all 16 campuses. And we've had some issues where a student looked at our catalog somewhere and got on this trajectory to enroll into this bridge program at this campus, only to find out months later that it isn't offered at their campus. And so how do we ensure that everything that we have offered could be available across our state in some way, as we look at flexible offerings and pathways and things like that? So that is what we're working on in nursing over the last couple of years, but very specifically just the last few months. Any questions or anything I can answer for you all?
Some comments, Mr. Chair. Just we're very appreciative of your work, Dr. Selvage, and your counterparts across the state. This is an area that last year we're going through the SJR with the recommendation to maintain college level accreditation. The caveat was we need to work to have consistency borderline uniformity on our allied health. So it goes beyond nursing, And also keep in mind that the reforms that we do internally are only a piece of the puzzle. We also have third-party accreditors. We have Kentucky Board of Nursing, very rule-oriented, regulation-oriented. The Kentucky Hospital Association, we're going to be pitching an idea to in the near future about how we can help recruit nursing faculty that are currently in our facilities. They want to try their hand at teaching as well. It's very complicated, but the portability for students for credit earned is a top priority here. And then just real quickly go back to VP Shook's presentation. This Flex Train pilot we're putting up, that's one of the beauties about KCTCS. We're so large that we can establish pilots pretty quickly, see if they're working, evaluate, scale up, scale down, eliminate new policy, et cetera. And the last thing I have is the SWAT initiative that VP Shook started out with. And Regent Girdler, you know this realm of Kentucky probably better than anyone else. When we're talking to businesses, they are trying to choose Kentucky as a home, or more importantly, stay here as well. You know, I might get a business card from somebody and say, what can you do to help? And then the whole goal here is that whether it's the Cabinet for Economic Development, you at the local level, that company, employer is given the full menu of options of economic development strategies that sometimes perhaps we can handle the KCTCS side, but we fail to make that introduction to the local economic developer, usually county oriented or regionally oriented as well. And then making sure that the Cabinet for Economic Development's on board, et cetera, et cetera. And so my whole mantra with the SWOT analysis is that we got to make sure that nothing falls through the cracks. And how many companies don't have the ability to have a dedicated staffer to analyze all the economic development packages that we have? A lot of them, the mom and pops out there, if they get one or two bad experiences or one or two experiences where a phone call is not returned, they may say, I got to get back to work. And so we will make sure that we have a more systematic approach on this. But to close out here on allied health, this is an area that every month we're working with PLT on this and our counterparts. I think it's an area ripe for consistency across the system.
Thank you, Dr. Quarles. Thank you all. Appreciate it. Do you guys want to take a quick, like 5-10 minute break? Then we got about 5 more items and we'll be wrapping it up. Okay, we'll come back at 10:25. No, we will now ask Executive Vice President and Provost, Dr. Phil Neal, to introduce the increased learner success.
All right, some exciting stuff that you have heard this morning, and I hope to continue that. On your drive home today, as you're noodling about strategic planning, I hope the next topic keeps a smile on your face. I'm going to present one action item request today and then several updates around learner success. One of the great privileges, I think, for the Board of Regents is to periodically, as we present to you, ratify the KCTCS colleges candidates for credentials. And these are the students who have completed the requirements to meet a credential, whether it be a certificate, diploma, or degree. There's quite a bit of information in your packet. This request for the ratification or for the credentials earned between the dates September 28th through January 3rd. There was about 4,272 total unduplicated students earning credentials during that window who collectively earned a little over 5,600 different credentials, because sometimes students will earn multiple credentials depending on how their program is set up. And so we ask that for you to ratify the candidates for credentials.
Okay. So we have a motion for the KCTCS Board of Regents to approve the awarding of KCTCS colleges candidates for degrees and diplomas and ratify certificates as presented in the supplemental booklet, September 28th, 2024 through January 3rd, 2025, for KCTCS candidates for credentials. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Okay. Got a motion and a second. Would you like to call the roll?
Chair Martin,
Yes.
Vice Chair Hamilton,
Yeah.
Secretary Whitten,
Yes, and congratulations to all those students.
Mhm.
Regent Cox,
Yes.
Regent Girdler, Regent Hall,
Yes.
Regent Higdon,
Yes.
Regent McGraw,
Yes.
Regent Powers, Regent Rabinowitz. Yeah. Regent Schaus,
Yes.
Regent Stevens,
Aye.
Regent Sutherland.
Yes.
The motion is passed with Regent Powers being noted as not present.
Okay, thanks. And yes,
Yeah.
congratulations. Just a quick side note. I was really surprised about 2 years ago when our chief operating officer, her daughter had told her like the night before, it was like, hey, I've got something with Barry's signature on it. And I asked her what it was, and she said it was the diploma. It was one of the certificates because she was on dual credit in high school. Because I was thinking, she's in high school. What am I on something? But it was very nice to know that. And
Yeah.
comforting.
Yeah.
So
Yes, congratulations to those students and our faculty and staff who helped them along the way. I know we roll through these recommendations and these motions that you vote on fairly quickly, but you just impacted nearly 4,300 lives, and I want to thank you for that. The next few items are updates that I'll share with you. The first one being the certificate and program approval. In your board packet, you will see that periodically our colleges will request to bring on new credentials or full-blown degree programs at their college. I'll talk a little bit, you are probably fairly familiar with the way our stackable credentials are set up in our technical fields or applied science fields. And then our AA and AS are primarily standalone degree programs. The way that we structure this is that the KCTCS system has a catalog of programs that have been built, approved, and are utilized. But not all colleges utilize the same programs because of the way that their industries are set up in their local communities. They have to bring on programs that respond to the local industry need. And sometimes that industry need changes, and a program that they may have in place and applicable or relevant to industry needs one day might change. And either we have to change the equipment, change the learning outcomes, or just completely suspend a program because it's no longer in need. And in other cases, new programs are needed as new industries move to the community or industries evolve. And so colleges can request the addition of new credentials, or they can suspend. I'll talk a little bit about suspension and closure here in a minute and the difference between that, but suspend a program that is no longer needed. As you can see in your packet, we'll go through just a couple of full-blown associate degree requests, and we'll then highlight a couple of certificates at the very end. I won't read these all to you, but Ashland is bringing on a new Associate of Applied Science degree in electrical technology with a specialty in industrial technician. We also have at Henderson a new Associate of Applied Science degree, new to them, let me put it that way, new to them, not new to the system, in education for our folks, our students that want to do a 2+2 through Henderson and go on to Murray State University. Maysville has a couple of certificates. Laura, Dr. McCullough is in the audience today if you have questions. One on civil engineering technology, and you can see a little bit of history there about working with the company in their area that is needing that. And then also electrical technology with automated industrial controls as one of the tracks within that. Somerset is asking for to bring on the Human and Social Services Applied Science degree, and there's a variety of activities that have been going on the eastern part of the state and over through Somerset and whatnot over the years as part of a CLIMB initiative, and we're going to be partnering on doing some more things there. So Somerset is bringing that program forward. A little bit more on their program. Gateway, and Dr. Figueroa is here with us today, is also bringing on the Associate of Applied Science degree in education. We know that the state of Kentucky has brought education forward as one of the high demand sectors, so you're starting to see more and more of these programs offered around the state. And then lastly, we have 2 certificates that are being brought on at Hopkinsville and 2 at Jefferson, both in the energy and manufacturing related fields. Any questions on the program additions?
Dr. Neal,
Yes.
I noticed the education, I'm kind of going back because I saw gateways as well. So the one with Henderson, is there any way we could talk more about that? Because it looks like it's just changing the curriculum by one class. Can we?
Jason and Fernando, would you guys mind coming to the microphone and talking about where your colleges are wanting to take that?
Yeah, it is a very modest change in that, but it does allow us to award both. And many of our students that work with Murray State University, it's really an opportunity for them to do the AA as well as the AAS. So it's something that we're responding to Murray State University on that. So we've got a really good partnership there.
And it's the same concept. I mean, the basic thing is to make sure that our curriculum matches the needs of our area as well as the university strategies. And so that's kind of why we did it. I don't remember the exact details of it, but I trust my provost.
Any other questions?
So do I.
And I will say, thank you to the colleges that are bringing forward new programs to better respond to industries, the high wage or high demand sectors in our state, because that's how we move forward. We're talking a lot about efficiencies, creating more efficiencies, finding more shared services. But we have to grow our way into the future, in my opinion. And the way that we grow our way is to find efficiencies in some respects, but also add new programs to be more responsive as industry continues to change and evolve. So I'm very excited about that. The next portion is kind of on the other side of this conversation, which is certificate and program suspension. As I mentioned, sometimes credentials become no longer relevant to the industry in our area because technology changes or other economic fronts change from one community to the next. And so sometimes we need to just go ahead and suspend. We have no more enrollment in a certificate or a full-blown program, or it is waning because the jobs have moved on or have changed. And so we can suspend a program. Now I mentioned the difference between a suspension and a full-blown program closure. So if a college chooses to suspend a program, if any of those students are currently enrolled in the program that they're going to suspend, they have to teach the courses until the currently enrolled students have finished. That's called a teach out program. That's part of our accreditation standard, and it's the right thing to do for our students. Once the program is suspended, then it can stay in suspension for 5 years. We won't admit any new students into the program. But the college, if things change over that 5-year period of time, industry brings back a need for that particular educational path, they can ask for a reactivation of that same program within the 5-year window. After the 5-year window expires, it is closed. And if they want to bring it back at a later date, they have to go through a full program approval process that runs through our standard processes through the Board of Regents and as well as CPE. So for the update today, we have 7 colleges that are suspending programs. You can see those colleges there and the types of credentials that they are suspending. In your board packet, you'll actually see a chart that goes all the way back to 1998, I think it is, that shows that this is a regular inventory control process. It's a continuous improvement process that we go through to cull the programs that are no longer needed, to then be able to redirect resources into program expansions or program additions. So it's a very important process, but it's not a new process for us. Questions? All right, we'll move on to the next one. Now, this, as I mentioned earlier, when we were talking about strategic planning, sometimes we have strategies or initiatives that come from our own strategic planning process. Sometimes it comes out of reports like the Huron report or the SJR report. Sometimes it comes from CPE or external agencies. This one actually came from you all. Back in 2022, I think it was, the board was asking about student learning outcomes and the difference between how students perform in online classes versus in class or face-to-face in-person classes. And are we looking at that? Do we see performance gaps there? And so we were at, I think the board was at Bluegrass Community Technical College when we started to highlight some outcomes between some high enrollment courses like English, biology, college algebra, intro to business, intro to computers, and the such. And we did see a pretty significant performance gap in between the online student performance and the face-to-face in classroom student performance. And so you asked the administration to put together a plan that would help to improve quality performance in our classrooms and ultimately student success outcomes. Now, I will have to say, we were already doing a lot of that work. Our faculty were already involved in a quality assurance program across all the modalities. We're already doing a lot of good work, but this gave us the incentive to create a system-wide, consistent plan that we could then focus on improving student outcomes and closing performance gaps between our online classes, because we were seeing online performance a little bit lower than our face-to-face or in-class students. So out of that, and our faculty regents could probably speak to this very well, because I think you both have been involved in this in a number of different ways. So the faculty and our academic leadership put together a 3-phase program. First, it was to identify nearly 24 standards, quality standards that should be incorporated into online courses. And we called those the KCTCS essential standards. They were built on national normed high quality standards. But before we could start incorporating those, if they weren't already incorporated into classes, we had to put our faculty through training. So the first phase of that was to do ideally 100% of our full-time faculty go through the KEYS training. Then we would later go after the adjuncts and try to get our adjunct faculty to go through the KEYS training as well. And I'm happy to say that we reported out to you last year that 100% of our full-time faculty went through the training the first year. I'll tell you about our adjunct rates here in just a moment. Well, that was the first level, get everybody trained. The second level was then to take that training of those standards and do a self-assessment of one of your online courses if you're a faculty teaching an online course. And make sure that you're applying these standards in the way that they should in your own course. The third level was a peer review. That same course that you were just working on with your quality standards would then be reviewed by a peer group of seasoned faculty who had been teaching for many, many years. And they would look at it and do a thorough evaluation and provide you feedback on anything that may need to be changed, tweaked, or celebrated, depending on how your course was put together. Now, that third level of review, we're doing every 2 years, because I think Regent Whitten, I think you mentioned in a previous meeting how time intensive that peer review process is. I think I had heard something along the lines of 6 hours you would have to put in to review one online course to make sure that the standards are incorporated in there. So you do that by hundreds, if not thousands, of courses across the system, and it is a staffing investment when it comes to that peer review. So we're doing that every other year. So as far as I was saying earlier, we had 100% of our faculty, full-time faculty trained last year. This year, we were focusing on our adjuncts, and to date, we have 75% of our adjunct who have gone through that KEYS training. The second level, which is the self-review, again, this year, we're working with our adjuncts. We have about 66, or about 2/3 of our faculty who've completed the self-assessment of their course. And then again, as I was talking about the peer validation, we'll go through that next year. 'Cause this is the year that we're skipping, or we'll do the peer review evaluation next year. Any questions or comments, particularly from our, yes, sir. Absolutely. I had a feeling that question was coming. So we pulled the data just this week. And so back when we were first talking about this and presenting it to the board when we were at Bluegrass Community Technical College, we were really focused on 6 high enrollment courses. It was Intro to Business, Biology 1, Intro to Computers, Freshman English, College Algebra, and Intro to Psych. And we did see performance gaps in all of those, from the online compared to the in-person. And the in-person, higher pass rates than online. I am happy to say that we have closed the gaps on several of these courses. The Intro to Business, the online pass rates are now surpassing the in-person pass rates. And that's no easy task, because the in-person pass rates went up since then too. So the Intro to Business, our business faculty and students have done a fantastic job. The same is true with Biology 1. Our online pass rates have now equaled, actually surpassed by 0.1% of our face-to-face. Our Intro to Computers tends to be one that did not see a lot of movement on the online, so we're still focusing on that one. We did see increases in the face-to-face, but the online has stayed consistent. Our Freshman English, there is still a little bit of a gap by about 7.4% difference between the two. However, what we saw in that one and the remainders of these, the math and the psychology, is that the performance of the online and the in-person both went up in both areas. And so the student success is improving, but we still have a little bit of gap that we're trying to close. One of the things that we are not seeing in this go around is double-digit gap percentage that we did see when we first started this process. So good things to celebrate, but the work is not over. We're going to continue to work on this, and it's going to be a continued part of our future. I don't know if our faculty regents want to give some contextual experiences or reflections on this process.
Well, yeah, Russ is over here shaking his head going, yeah, 7%. I'm like, that. And then, of course, the administrative support that we've had, I know different institutions do it differently, but those teaching and learning centers are paramount, having faculty help faculty and train faculty. It's been really great.
Yeah.
Marty?
Ditto. Huh?
I know it's good results, but on our side, it's a lot of work.
It is. It is a very consistent process, because all of our faculty are going through it, which is nice to see, but there's a lot of work in this. The thing that I like to see, as I was reading those numbers off to you, our students are succeeding at higher rates, not just in online, but in face-to-face as well.
There was a report that somebody gave us a few years ago that showed the highest fail rate was a math class. College, was it college algebra?
Probably math 150, I'm guessing.
That would be my guess too.
Is that still accurate?
I'll have to look and see. We can pull that data for you.
Okay. Okay.
Not failure.
On that, Dr. Neal, you bring up a good point. I would love for you to maybe distribute it out to everyone, because I know us as faculty work on all these things, like, did it do anything?
Right.
I don't know, but you've got the numbers already. Thank you for that. Could you, I don't know, newsletter or something, or your message, whatever, and send it out to everyone and say, hey, this is working. Look at the numbers.
Yeah,
We
no,
don't get that.
that's the exciting part. And that's why I asked for the numbers to be pulled, because I had a feeling this question was coming, and it's a good question to ask. How are we doing? If we're going to invest all of this, how are our students doing?
Right.
And so I'm very pleased that we're not even through one full cycle with our adjuncts right now, and we're seeing these kind of results of closing gaps and progress. So
I think the faculty needs to hear that.
Absolutely. We'll get that out.
Ryan?
Dr. Neal, do you have any data on how this has affected dual enrollment performance?
I don't have it with me, but we can pull that together for you.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay. Shannon, will you take a note for me on that one, please? Other questions? But congratulations to all our faculty and students for working on this.
Yes,
This
thank
has
you.
been a big lift.
Enrollment?
All right, so the last one I will leave you with is enrollment. We try to celebrate enrollment increases when we can, and this has been a good year. Things have turned around from COVID, and we're starting to see, well, we're continuing to see strong enrollment this spring. As of the printing of this report, is up over 7%. We were up over 8% in the fall, so this has been a very good year. One of the things that I love about this report is that we're up in just about every student category that you can look at, whether that's full-time students, whether it's our credential-seeking students, which that is many times in the past, when we've talked about enrollment, what's leading the charge is increases in dual credit enrollment, which we love our dual credit students. Don't get me wrong. We absolutely love our dual credit, but that's been the story for a lot of years. Now to see our credential seeking students, which are your students that are there more likely to be full-time than a dual credit student would be, those numbers are looking tremendous, the increase there. And it's not just returning students. We are seeing increases in our returning students who were with us in the fall, returning in the spring. We're also seeing increases in new students. That's the exciting part. And, we've been talking as a state for a while now about trying to reach the older working adult and get them back into classes. The greatest gains in each age category is coming in our adult populations. We got double-digit increases in population from about 25 to 45 years old. So it really is a success story on the enrollment front, and we got to keep that going. That's our goal, is to keep that going, keep continuing to serve more Kentuckians and getting them through their programs at higher rates. So questions about enrollment?
That's great news.
A question on that, if you may, because I know we were struggling with the adult male population for a while. Have we made any progress in that? Or, I know that we're doing a lot more outreach and marketing in those areas. So I just didn't know if the data.
I don't have it broken down in this report by adult males, but we can look at that for you. But it's a pretty successful outcome. And the question I was anticipating is, what's the one thing that's making the difference? And I'll tell you, it's not one thing. It is a multitude of things. It's all the advocacy work. It's about the reputations our colleges have in their communities. It's about the outreach from our recruiters. It's our faculty working with industries and in the high schools. It's the second chance or the recovery networks that we're working with. It is a multitude of things. It's you all being champions across the state. Enrollment isn't just one thing. It's fundraising for scholarships and our retention efforts and so many other things. And so it is a multifaceted part of our organization, and it will always be that way. I think anybody who works in an organization that serves lots of people, the customer base is never there just because of one strategy. We have to have a multi-layered strategy across the entire organization. Yes, sir.
A question for maybe to lead me into June. This is great. This also means more revenue, right? How should we think about more revenue as it relates to the compensation discussion we had yesterday? If you looked at a 5-year rolling average, have we ever had a year where we went backwards? You see what I'm saying from the standpoint of, I feel like the more revenue is going to feel better from having a compensation discussion. However, as Barry and I know, revenue is never guaranteed in our business. You can go backwards, but I don't remember a time like in that 5-year rolling average post-COVID where we've gone backwards. What I'm trying to get at is, can we count on that as we think about compensation discussions, or is that something we need to roll back on?
I'll answer yes and no. I think that number one is that times are good right now. Enrollment's up, revenue's good. And I think that as we think about tuition, that needs to be connected directly to what we offer and compensation for the KCTCS teammates. Number two is that when we do make adjustments, those are long-term obligations that roll into future year projections. And we know that there's a lot of discussion about the enrollment cliff. However, our team believes that we're quite insulated from that, but you never know. You never know what's going to happen with the economy as well. Sometimes that actually increases enrollment if things were to change. But regardless, we want to have better compensation. I think we have to look at that being intricately related with not just tuition, but operating funds, and we're already getting signals from Frankfurt that next budget cycle may not be as rosy. And so I hope that helps answer a question with a yes and no, but they have to be directly related.
I guess maybe, Todd, if you could, if we could, or Brian, somebody, if we could see a correlation in June of maybe the last 5 years, how enrollment has ebbed and flowed, if it has, and what that's translated into revenue. All I'm trying to do is to have a data point to project the next 5 years. Yeah, because I think one of the things you got to do in compensation is begin to talk about a plan that's longer term to get where you want to go. So how would this revenue, it's always good when we can tie successful enrollment to everyone succeeding. So is there a way that we can view it to where as a group we feel fairly comfortable? I mean, I don't know that we can expect 7% a year, but
we're happy to do that. And also there's a lot of nuances here. So we talk about increased enrollment, and a lot of it's being driven by dual credit enrollees as well, which again, is half revenue, if that sometimes. And so you got to look at the revenue side and not just head count as well.
Yeah. To that point, FTE is up. I know FTE doesn't make a lot of sense to folks that aren't in our industry, but that's a factor that looks at how many credit hours, paid credit hours you generated per full-time student. If you were to equate all the students, part-time and full-time, into a full-time equivalency, which is where the word FTE comes from. FTEs are up. That means our students are taking more credit hours per student, which is really exciting to see. I will say, to your point, not necessarily the compensation point. I'll let others talk about that one, but from an enrollment projection standpoint, yes, the enrollment does ebb and flow in America in higher education, and we're not insulated from that. Actually, if you look back decades and decades, the research shows one of the highest correlations, or one of the things that are most strongly correlated with enrollment dips and rises is the unemployment rate. When the economy is doing well, people have lots of jobs, you typically see lower enrollment because people are prioritizing their employment, and vice versa happens when the economy starts to slow. We've tried to put some things in place over the last decade where you start to hear about more flexible programs where students can have a job and keep their education going forward. That's been a moderator of the ebbs and flows. Dr. Quarles, in anticipation of this, has put together, we just pulled this team together from all 16 colleges and system office, an enrollment task force. Part of their job is to research this enrollment cliff and better understand how it may impact us, because not every state in the country will be impacted the same, and not every region of within a state will be impacted the same. So making sure we're getting our arms around that. But the second piece of their charge is every college has a strategic enrollment management plan, and that is a multi-year looking out into the future. Here's what we're trying to set for enrollment targets year by year. Here are the populations that we're going to be working on. Here's our expected enrollment in each of those populations year by year, and here are the strategies that we're going to put in place to try to make that enrollment reach the goals that they've set for themselves. It really is part of the bigger strategic plan concept, but this is really focused on enrollment. And so that's what we call those, our SEM plans, or strategic enrollment management plan. We've had those in place for a number of years, and colleges are updating those on an annual basis. We're looking at the framework that we're all 16 using and going to modernize that framework if it needs it, but then make sure that every college is up to date on setting those multi-year enrollment targets and population projections, if that makes sense, so that we can do exactly what you're talking about. Yes, the question is, can you count on a 5% enrollment growth a year, 7%? I think you do have to project growth and grow yourself into the future. I think if we project going backwards, that's a downward spiral that's very difficult to get out of. So.
It's almost a stress test of that figure for us to project how we approach, if we approach linking the two in any way from the standpoint of revenue. That's all.
Yeah.
And I do think it's hard because this is probably our first full year post-COVID of some normalcy.
Yeah.
So I think we're probably looking at a base year for what's to come.
Yeah, we do believe we have the COVID comeback, bounce back. We are at a 10-year high. we celebrate that. We're celebrating increased enrollment, and keep in mind, some of our colleges are beyond 7% as well. But if you look at what's going on perhaps with some of our private institutions across Kentucky, they're very envious of our enrollment increase because they're not seeing those yields right now. Then let's talk about other elastic costs that we have, increased in insurance cost. We're lucky the General Assembly gave us a nice bump on that. So it's a complicated matter.
But we're trying not to let the future happen to us. We're trying to strategically make the future happen that we believe Kentucky deserves.
Any more questions for Dr. Neal? Thank you, Dr. Neal.
Thank you, Chair.
Appreciate it. Okay, we have one item before we get ready to adjourn. Chris Crumrine, our Chief Government Affairs Officer, he's going to come up and give us a little briefing on the Frankfurt happenings, and I guess DC.
I can cover both, Mr. Chairman, being respectful of everybody's time. Good morning. It is day 28 of the state legislative session, the 30-day session. So it's been busy. They did not waste time filing legislation. More than 1,000 bills have been filed since the first week of January. Now that's no indication of how many are actually going to move through the process, but 1,000 bills were filed, and KCTCS has been tracking a little more than 170 of those bills as it relates to our operations and programs. I think yesterday, Dr. Quarles gave a brief overview in terms of where we are on the SJR 179 recommendations. I think the top line takeaway is that the General Assembly recognizes that we answered the assignment that they gave us, that we came forward with bold recommendations on 179. But given the totality of which those recommendations have budget implications, be waiting until a budget session to address those writ large. But please know that the General Assembly was happy to see that product come through, which is why through a measure, House Joint Resolution 34 that passed earlier this week, they authorized the release of $90 million to support 3 capital projects across the system. So that's their indication that the General Assembly, I think, is sees KCTCS on a positive trajectory with a direction that has been carried out by this board, Dr. Quarles and the administration. So take that as a good takeaway from our legislative session with HJR 34. I think there are a few bills that have come to the attention of our system that we're tracking particularly closely, that public post-secondary education is tracking particularly closely. The top of those is House Bill 4. That's the state's DEI reform legislation and the implications that it has for our system. That was filed and went through the process over the last several weeks. Primarily, again, it's sort of at the top line, prohibits a lot of what has been a concern nationally around trainings, around DEI, mandated statements, things like that for hiring. Feel good about where we are as a system with compliance with that legislation. A lot of the work done to get that bill across the aisle and across both chambers was focused on ensuring our sovereign immunity protections as an institution remain intact. The final bill did not include any private rights of action. The final bill had specific reporting requirements on an annual basis rather than a monthly basis. So from a compliance standpoint, I think we feel good as an institution in complying with House Bill 4 as we move forward. What it does essentially from a prohibition standpoint is it prohibits DEI offices at public post-secondary institutions, mandatory trainings, preferential admissions vis-a-vis the Harvard fair admissions case, bias innocence reporting systems and investigations, preferential treatment and contracting, so those entities that we contract with. It also prohibits licensure boards from requiring any type of DEI training for licensure requirements, and prohibits CPE from approving our academic programs on the basis of our DEI plans. What it will require institutions to do is annual compliance reporting, adopt statements of institutional neutrality, and implement campus climate surveys. That's for all public post-secondary institutions. House Bill 4 ensures protections for academic freedom, free speech. It carves out student resource centers, and then make sure that we are still complying with any federal laws like the Americans with Disabilities Act or Civil Rights Act. So that's where we landed on House Bill 4. As I mentioned, it went through later this week, subject to the governor's signature or veto. We'll determine whether or not the General Assembly revisits that the last 2 days of the session later this month. House Bill 424 is related to performance evaluations for presidents and faculty at public post-secondary institutions. That passed this week as well. It's commonly been referred to as the post-tenure review. What is actually included in that legislation, we should not have any concerns complying with, just given our own policies internally. But I know that has been in the media, that has been on the radar of our colleagues around the state. But that did pass this week as well. I want to bring up legislation that is unlikely to pass, but it is something that was included in SJR 179, and that is House Bill 427. It's related to transfer pathways between 2-year and 4-year institutions. I don't think it will end up getting through the Senate. It made it through the House, but I don't expect it to get through the Senate before sine die. We worked with the bill sponsor to get a few changes that we needed to protect our our Associate of Applied Science programs. But at the end of the day, don't think it's going to make it the rest of the way. I bring this up because it will be a topic that the General Assembly will talk about during the interim legislative session, and certainly relates to the recommendations that this board adopted in SJR 179 report. Senate Bill 77 passed this week. That is the Comprehensive Universities Reform Bill to allow them to launch doctoral programs. There were several bills filed specifically for certain comprehensive universities: Murray State's Vet School, Eastern's DO School, Western's R2 status, Kentucky State's doctoral program. None of the specific institutional bills went through. It's SB 77, where CPE would come around and approve those programs on a case-by-case basis if those comprehensive institutions meet certain metrics around retention, around graduation rates, around availability of resources internally to stand up those programs. So that was really where the comprehensive solutions reached a tipping point this session with 77. The last resolution or bill that I want to talk about is House Resolution 27 that is running this afternoon. If we're able to conclude the board meeting, we'd love to have some folks join us this afternoon. That's House Resolution 27 about Mental Health and Higher Education Day. Freshman Representative Aaron Thompson is carrying that, and it should go on the House floor today, raising awareness of what the mental health needs are on our campus and the importance of the work that campuses do to address the mental health needs of our folks. So that should be this morning. That's a high-level summary of some of what has really been moving in the higher education space in Frankfort. Before I talk about some brief federal updates, I'm happy to answer any questions.
I also think that CPE is going to be spearheading a study on air traffic controller training as well, and whether or not Kentucky can play a role in that. I hope the answer is yes.
Okay. On the federal side, Jessica and I have been in close contact around executive orders that have come down. I think many of you have been following the news. You know, we have executive orders from the Trump administration in the DEI space, Title IX policies, and how the Department of Education is interpreting those Title IX policies, anti-Semitism on college campuses. I think we've seen in the news some of the effect of those executive orders at four-year institutions, research institutions, Columbia University, Johns Hopkins, University of Maine. We've also been following the directive in the Department of Education as it relates to agency staff and the rollback of agency staff and riffing of agency staff. I think the most important thing to keep in mind as it relates to federal changes is continued directive that those federal programs that are distributing federal dollars directly to individuals, and I'm talking about Pell primarily, and other federal support programs that are being directly distributed to individuals, our students, are not affected, are not being pulled back, not being cut. Now, full disclosure, I would expect changes in staffing policies in the agencies. There might be some delays in information and reporting, but those programs have been outside of the cuts that we have seen so far at the federal level. Where we have seen some cuts are on those programmatic grants. And I appreciate our college presidents for keeping me updated as those impact their colleges. We've been communicating those with Kentucky's delegation, as well as our contract firm in DC, as those come down. We expect continuing outside of the executive order space, sort of regular order business. We expect a continuing resolution will pass this later this week to keep the government open. I was talking with a few of you last night at dinner, and I did say that this is a constantly evolving situation. Well, that was one of those evolutions last night when Senate Minority Leader Schumer announced a resolution on the minority party's part to keep the government open later this week. And then the other item is that FY26 budget negotiations are already starting at the federal level, and so we're watching those closely as well.
Any questions for Chris? Well, thank you for updating us and keeping your finger on the pulse of the ever-changing atmosphere in Frankfurt and DC.
It's my pleasure. Thank you all very much.
Thank you. Dr. Quarles, do you have a couple announcements?
Yes, thank you. First off, any of our presidents have any announcements for our regents? If so, let me know. Thank you for a fantastic meeting. I think we've been very engaged. I appreciate everybody, those joining us online as well. We do have a vacancy on the board, and so we'll be engaging the governor's office on that to fill that vacancy. As the chairman's about to announce, our next meeting is at ECTC, and then the September meeting will be at JCTC. A lot of construction going on, especially the LUMED area. And then we'll be back here in December, here at the system office. A few invitations that you've already heard about. Again, next week, collaboration with Goodwill as an education first employer in Louisville. We appreciate that, and congratulations to Norton Healthcare with your work with Goodwill as well on the west end of Louisville for the first hospital in over 150 years being built. And I sit on the Goodwill board for the state, and so it's be a fantastic announcement next week. Going Pro, again, we're going to kick that off on the statewide level, April 4th at the Capitol. Governor's invited, but we also have Going Pro events across our colleges. And so we're going to send that out to you all if you'd like to join at the college level for a Going Pro announcement as well. Let us know if you want to pass out a game ball for the Sweet 16. March 27th, we have a tentative announcement for our next transfer announcement. This is with Murray State University. And again, this is just not just transfer, but reverse transfer, data sharing, and then hopefully commitment to hire our employees as well. This is the next step before President Bob Jackson retires. And then, of course, April 16th is KCTCS Giving Day. I'm confident we'll have 100% participation in that. And April is also Community College Month. So we have a lot going on next month in terms of a promotion. What I'll be focusing on over the next couple months prior to our June meeting is, again, the interim period with the legislature. We'll have SJR reform conversations, but where we're going next, including budgetary ask as well. CPE, our office, and the other four-year institutions, we're going to start having a deep conversation about dual credit in Kentucky. We do 70% of it, and it's time for us to have a more strategic statewide plan on that. We do anticipate significant discussions and changes or potential changes on performance-based funding as well going into the 26th budget cycle. We're also working closely with the Second Chance Employers Initiative from the governor's office, but also our role with incarcerated Kentuckians, whether it's jails, prisons, also the recovery community as well in our state. We'll also start the evaluations for our cabinet, the leadership team, and our presidents as well. And we have been told that they're going to start the budgeting process for next year very early. So Todd and I have a lot of work to do with our counterparts across the system to submit our budget request high level by the month of May. And that's a couple months earlier than usual. We're gonna have some graduation ceremonies. If you'd like to go to a graduation ceremony in your area, please let us know. May. We also have the Fire Academy. Their graduation ceremony is on May 16th down in Madisonville. Down in Greenville, down in Muhlenberg County. And keep in mind, they're building a dormitory there as well. And so if you get to see recruits walk across stage, it just went through, I think it's a 13-week boot camp, I guess you could say, becoming a firefighter, along with, I think, 28 credit hours at the class from Madisonville Community College as well. We also have GED graduations. Those are fantastic events to attend, as well as certificate and accomplishments inside our jails and prisons as well. Let us know if you would like to attend any of these. Lastly, just want to say a thank you to our leadership team, the cabinet, our presidents for your counsel and leadership back at your local college, their respective teams, and of course, our faculty and staff that have the most public-facing role with our students every single day. Thank you for what you do across the system. And finally, just want to say a thank you to our Board of Regents that we've gone through a lot. We've got a path forward. We're going to continue to refine that path. We appreciate your input and let us know if you have any questions along the way. Thank you.
And you are going to squeeze in there the 3 presidential searches, right?
Yes, and they're right now, knock on wood, on schedule. And we aim and hope, of course, timelines can get a little squishy, but we hope to have those individuals named and starting by July 1st for all 3.
Great. That's good. Good luck. Okay, with that being said, any other questions, comments? Okay, so we will see everybody on June 12th and 13th at Elizabethtown Community and Technical College. So, and we will have lunch here as well. So, without further ado, that concludes our agenda items for today. I'll ask for a motion to adjourn.
Yes, sir.
James Lee, second.
Second.
Okay, second.
Any objections to the motion to adjourn? The motion passes by consensus.
Thank you all.
Thank you all online.